Hi, my name is Rowena, and I used to think betrayal had a face, until I saw my sister smiling the moment my husband pushed me down the stairs. He said I was faking it, the pregnancy, the symptoms, the pain. He called it a test. But what if the worst part isn't the fall itself, but the silence that followed? The way everyone looked away, the way she laughed. What kind of family needs proof that you're telling the truth about your own body? And when they finally believe you, is it already too late? Let me tell you what happened next. I hadn't taken a pregnancy test in nearly a year. The last time, I'd cried for 3 hours in the upstairs bathroom, wrapped in a towel like it could protect me from the echo of that single pink line. But this time there were two. Faint, but there. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just sat on the edge of the tub in our quiet home in Chapel Hill and stared at those lines until the sunlight shifted across the tiles. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from something I thought I'd buried deep. Hope. After 3 years of trying, after the surgery, after Gareth had said, "Maybe we're just not meant to be parents," I was pregnant. Really pregnant. But I didn't tell him. Not yet. I told myself I wanted to be sure. That I'd wait for the doctor to confirm. That I'd do it differently this time, protect this fragile beginning until I felt strong enough to share it. But really, I wasn't ready for his reaction. Or worse, his indifference. Gareth came home early that evening. He didn't smile like he used to. That warmth, the spark in his eye, gone. He said something about meetings being moved, tossed his keys in the dish, and asked if dinner was ready. I nodded and served the leftover chili. We ate in silence. "You okay?" I finally asked. He looked up from his bowl, then down again. "Fine. Just tired." No kiss. No hand on my back. He got up before I finished eating and disappeared upstairs. The next morning, I cleaned. It's what I did when my mind couldn't settle. Folding laundry, I reached into my purse to pull out a grocery list, and my fingers brushed something foreign, smooth, cool. I dug deeper and pulled out a tiny black device, a recorder. My heart dropped into my stomach. I stared at it like it had grown teeth. For a full minute, I didn't breathe. He put this here. Or did he? I sat on the floor, socks and t-shirts pooling around me, trying to remember when my purse had been left unattended. My mind raced, my chest tightened. Was I being paranoid? Had Gareth mentioned work-related tech? I couldn't recall. But why would this be hidden inside my personal bag? I tucked it back in. Didn't confront him. Not yet. By Friday, Gareth was suddenly attentive. Not affectionate, just observant. Too observant. At breakfast, he asked, "Didn't you have that OB checkup thing coming up?" I froze. "How'd you know about that?" I asked too quickly. "You put everything on the fridge calendar." I didn't. I never put my medical stuff on there. He poured his coffee and said nothing more. At lunch, I made myself a decaf. He raised an eyebrow. "Going soft on the caffeine now?" I gave a short laugh. "Just trying to sleep better." He nodded, but he watched me drink it like he was testing a theory. That night, lying in bed beside him, I stared at the ceiling and thought of the last time I was here. Really here, as a woman about to be a mother. When the first pregnancy ended, Gareth had held me briefly, patted my back like I was a child. The next morning, he'd said, "Let's not tell anyone. It's embarrassing enough." And now I was carrying again, and I didn't know who he was anymore. Saturday morning, Malis called. My younger sister was always calling at odd hours, her voice too bright, too sweet. "Hey, big sis, what are you doing next Friday? Mom and Dad want to do a little dinner, family night." I hesitated. "I might have something, work." "Liar," she laughed. "You work from home. You're probably in pajamas right now." I smiled thinly. "Maybe." "You sound different." "I don't know. Heavier?" she teased. I forced a chuckle. "Just tired." "Come anyway. Everyone's been asking about you. Gareth, too." We hung up after a few more obligatory pleasantries. I sat still for a long time, phone on my lap, pulse in my throat. That night, after Gareth went to bed early, claiming a migraine, I curled up on the living room couch. My hand rested over my stomach, protective, instinctive. I hope this time, I whispered to the quiet room, they believe you exist. Link to next chapter. From the hallway, Gareth watches quietly, unreadable expression. By the time Friday rolled around, the lines on the test had darkened. I had an appointment scheduled for next Tuesday, but I hadn't said a word. Not to Gareth, not to anyone. Just the thought of bringing it up twisted something inside me. He insisted we go to the gathering, said it would look weird if we skipped another family night. I wanted to stay home, curl up, rest, but I knew better than to fight him when he was on a mission to maintain appearances. I wore a long cardigan over a blouse that hung just loose enough to mask the changes I'd started noticing in the mirror. In the car, Gareth barely spoke. The radio stayed off. His hands gripped the steering wheel a little too tight. I didn't ask why. When we pulled up to his parents' new house, I had to force my breath steady. The backyard was strung with twinkle lights, soft jazz played from hidden speakers, and a table of cheese and wine was already surrounded by familiar faces in pressed polos and pastel dresses. "Hey, look who decided to show up," Gareth's uncle called as we stepped through the gate. His mom waved from the grill with tongs in one hand and a glass of Chardonnay in the other. Nothing about the scene looked threatening, but my skin prickled anyway. Maylise arrived 15 minutes after us, fashionably late as always, in a white jumpsuit that screamed attention. She moved like someone who knew the spotlight was hers, even when it wasn't. She hugged me longer than necessary, pulling me close enough to whisper, "You're glowing. Must be something in the water, or in your belly." Before I could respond, she handed me a small pink gift bag with glittery letters, for future little surprises. I stared at it, pulse skipping. She giggled. "Just for laughs," she said, loud enough for nearby cousins to hear. "You never know when a woman your age decides it's time to prove a point." I wanted to disappear. The evening blurred. People asked about work, about home renos, about whether we'd taken that Napa trip we kept talking about. Gareth played host, moved among relatives with practiced ease. I stayed near the drinks table, sipping sparkling water, pretending it was something stronger. When I declined wine for the third time, Gareth's mom tilted her head. "No Merlot for you tonight? That's not like you." "She's been eating strange lately, too," Gareth chimed in, smiling just a bit too tightly. "Cravings or something. Probably nothing." His tone was light, but it carried a hook. I felt the eyes turn, the silent calculation beginning. I fumbled for my purse to grab my phone and realized it had already fallen to the deck. As I bent down, a gasp sliced through the air. My pregnancy test. The same one I'd used, kept tucked away in the zippered side pocket. It lay on the ground like a verdict. "Oh my God," Milas said dramatically, pressing a hand to her chest. "Are you seriously carrying that thing around like a trophy?" Someone snorted. Another aunt whispered. Gareth picked it up, turned it in his hand, then looked right at me. "This isn't new," he said coldly. "She's been keeping it for weeks. Don't read too much into it." I don't remember how I got to the bathroom. I just remember the door shutting behind me and the silence inside. The lights were too bright. My face in the mirror looked drawn, unfamiliar. I leaned forward, bracing my palms on the sink, and tried to breathe through the rising burn in my throat. Just 2 days ago, I was holding on to something delicate and real. Now, it felt like everyone had touched it with dirty hands. I hadn't told them because I wasn't ready to grieve in public again. Not like last time. I wanted this to be ours, mine, for a little longer. And now they had taken that too. My palm drifted to my stomach. A silent apology. A promise I couldn't speak aloud. When I opened the bathroom door, Maylise stood leaning against the hallway wall, arms crossed. Was that supposed to be your big reveal? She asked, eyes narrowed, lips curled in something that wasn't quite a smile. I didn't answer. I didn't flinch. But inside me, something shifted. Something cold and sharp began to form. Quiet but steady. Link to next chapter. Rowena doesn't answer, but inside, something cold and sharp begins to form. I woke to sunlight pouring in through the blinds, a bright, almost offensive warmth brushing across my face. The other side of the bed was empty. Gareth had left early, or hadn't come back at all. I didn't know which, and I wasn't in the mood to ask. My body felt heavy, not just in the way I'd come to expect in the last few weeks, but in my chest, like I'd slept with bricks stacked on my ribs. The images from last night played behind my eyes like a cruel home movie. Melissa's smug smile, the pink gift bag, the way Gareth didn't even flinch when the test fell out. "She's been carrying it for weeks," he'd said, as if I were some delusional woman clinging to a fantasy. That coldness, that wasn't new, but seeing it so publicly made it feel sharper. I sat up slowly, nausea tugging at the edges of my stomach. Not from the pregnancy, but from the humiliation still clawing at me. I hadn't eaten much at the party, and the pit in my gut reminded me of every silent dinner we'd had lately. Somewhere in the distance, I heard birds chirping, the suburban kind of quiet, lawnmowers in the next block, a dog barking once, then silence. I made my way downstairs, set a slice of toast in the toaster, and stared at it until it popped up. I never spread anything on it, just stared at the dry bread and poured myself a half cup of decaf. My doctor's voice echoed faintly. "Just avoid full caffeine for now, but decaf is fine." Even that felt like a secret. I sat at the table with the news humming softly in the background. A headline about a recall on car seats. Something about a senator resigning. None of it stuck. It all blurred together in a haze of gray noise. I found myself drifting to my office, the smallest room in the house. It had once been a nursery. We'd painted it yellow. Gareth picked the shade, said it was gender neutral. That paint had long since been covered by a dusty taupe. I hadn't entered it in months. I opened the bottom drawer of the file cabinet, looking for an old receipt, and instead found something unexpected. My journal. Leather-bound, slightly bent at the corners. I hadn't written in it since. I didn't want to finish the sentence. I opened it to a marked page, not by my hand. A pink ribbon I never remembered using sat between entries. I pulled it open. There, in my own handwriting, was the entry from the week I lost our first baby. Raw, unfiltered, pages stained with a teardrop I didn't recall falling, and smeared, like someone had read it recently, thumbed through it. The ink around one paragraph blurred slightly, as if pressed too hard. I could hear my own voice in my head from that day, a cracked version of myself trying to rationalize grief. Maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe Gareth is right. It's better we didn't tell anyone. But what struck me now was the familiarity of the words. Not mine, but Melissa's. At brunch, 2 weeks after I'd miscarried, she'd laughed. Actually laughed, when I declined a mimosa and joked, "Well, looks like someone's resetting the clock early." At the time, I'd brushed it off. Told myself she didn't mean it, that she didn't know the full story. But now I knew better. She'd read this. That day, I left my office door unlocked. She'd come by to drop off something for Gareth. Said she wanted to check in on me. She must have gone through the drawers. Must have found this journal and devoured the pain I hadn't even spoken aloud. I felt nauseous again, but not from hormones, from betrayal. I slowly closed the journal, my fingers tightening around the worn leather edges. I whispered, more to the empty room than to myself. "So that's how you knew exactly what to say?" This wasn't just about last night. This was about patterns, repeating wounds dressed up as jokes. She didn't stumble upon my vulnerability. She weaponized it. My heart thudded a little faster as I walked back to the kitchen, grabbed my laptop, and opened a blank document. I wasn't writing for catharsis, not anymore. I was documenting. I needed to start keeping track, not just of what had happened, but of what they tried to bury. Link to next chapter. She reaches for her laptop, heart pounding, not to write, but to record what's coming next. There was something about her smile that had stayed with me. Not the one she wore when she handed me that cursed pink bag. Not even the one she forced when the pregnancy test fell from my purse. It was later, after the whole thing blew up. I caught her standing in the hallway just outside the bathroom. Her arms crossed, lips tilted up, eyes gleaming like she'd just witnessed something deeply satisfying. It wasn't confusion, it was amusement. Glee, even. That image stuck with me all through the night and into the afternoon. After Gareth left for a so-called gym run, I sat down at the dining table, laptop in front of me, and stared at the blinking cursor. Then, my gaze slid across the room to the corner shelf, where the router for the home security system blinked its steady green. Gareth installed it, for safety, he said. For us. But I'd never been shown how to use it. Never had the login. Never thought to ask, until now. I stood, grabbed a sticky note from the drawer, and called the support line. I used the customer ID from the pamphlet Gareth left in a junk drawer last year. The woman on the phone was polite, a little too helpful. Within minutes, she reset the password and emailed me temporary access. It took longer than I'd like to navigate the archive folders, but I eventually found the file labeled Backyard Cam, March 18th. My heart beat louder with each double click. The footage loaded. It showed Gareth's mom arranging cheese platters, cousins laughing over cornhole, then Milas making her entrance, her arms out, all performative charm. I watched myself appear on screen, standing stiff in the corner, with a drink I never sipped. The timestamp said 6:42 p.m. I fast-forwarded. At 7:03, I watched my purse fall. I paused the video, then scrolled ahead. At 7:04:43, black screen. I blinked, leaned in, clicked around. The screen stayed blank for exactly 2 hours. Just static. No audio, no motion, no error message. When the video returned, it was 9:04 p.m., and Gareth's uncle was helping his wife pack up folding chairs. I sat back in the chair, stunned, my mouth dry. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the exact window when the chaos happened, the moment the test was discovered, when Milise made her little scene, gone? Coincidence? No. Not with Milas's smirk still etched into my mind. I went upstairs, hoping for quiet. But as I entered the hall, Gareth came out of his office, a towel slung over his shoulder, hair still damp from a shower. "Hey," he said casually. "Didn't expect you home." "I live here," I replied flatly. He gave a tight laugh, drying his hands on the towel. "Right. Just meant I figured you'd go out or something." I stepped past him into the office. He didn't follow. Yet. I opened my laptop again and brought up the footage. The gap. The blank screen. He appeared in the doorway after a beat. "What are you doing?" "Checking the cameras." There was a pause. Then, "Why?" I turned in my chair, looked him square in the face. "Why is there a 2-hour gap in the video from the party?" His smile faltered. "Probably a power glitch. The system's old." "There was no outage, Gareth. I checked Duke Energy's reports for that day. No storms, not even a flicker." He didn't respond. I could feel the temperature drop between us. A strange tightness entered the air. "You're digging a lot lately," he said after a moment. "That's not healthy." I didn't blink. Neither is hiding evidence. His nostrils flared, just barely, but he turned away. "I've got errands." He left without another word. When I was sure he was gone, I reopened the file manager. My fingers moved on autopilot. I exported the file, gap and all, and saved it to a flash drive I encrypted on the spot. Then I deleted the original from the local drive. I stared at the little USB stick in my palm for a moment, its sleek silver body cool to the touch. I whispered, "If they think I'm bluffing, they're going to regret it." The cap clicked into place, sharp and final. My eyes drifted to the front door. Link to next chapter. The flash drive clicks shut as her eyes settle on the front door. I didn't need more confirmation. The missing footage had said everything it needed to. The gap, the carefully timed blackout. It wasn't just a glitch. It was a choice. Like so many choices Gareth and Malis made when they thought I wasn't watching. He was waiting in the living room when I came downstairs, already dressed like we were going to Sunday brunch. Slacks, button-down, cologne, that always made me sneeze a little. He didn't look up from his phone when he said, "You ready to go?" I grabbed my keys, not answering him directly. Outside, the air was cool for a spring evening, the kind that made your bones ache even in warmth. We didn't talk during the short drive to his parents' house. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Mine were wrapped around the flash drive in my pocket. By the time we arrived, the backyard lights were already on. I could hear the clatter of silverware and murmurs of relatives settling into their routines. I didn't make it 10 feet into the house before Gareth pulled me aside. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but sharp. "I don't think now is the time," I said, glancing toward the den where his mother was pouring wine. He gestured toward the staircase. "Just 2 minutes," I followed. We stopped at the midpoint landing where the walls curved slightly. Gareth turned to face me, hands in his pockets. "So," he began, "are we going to keep pretending?" I blinked. "Pretending what?" He leaned forward, the corner of his mouth twitching in what might have been a smile in another context. "That you're pregnant, that this isn't another one of your games." My blood chilled. "Excuse me? You've done it before, talked about symptoms, acted fragile, got everyone worried for nothing." His eyes didn't blink. "That's not what happened." He tilted his head, as if studying me like a stranger. "You need help, Rowena." And then, in one fluid motion, he placed his hand on my shoulder and pushed. It wasn't hard. It wasn't violent. It was deliberate. I stumbled down the 3 steps before my foot caught the carpet edge. My body twisted, the pain shooting up my spine as I landed awkwardly on my side. My elbow slammed the bottom step, then my hip. The impact jarred me, but what I felt most wasn't physical. It was the ripping. A scream caught in my throat, but didn't make it out. I lay still for a second, staring at the ceiling, chest heaving. From above, a laugh. Light. Almost musical. I turned my head slightly. Malis. She stood at the hallway balcony, her face calm, eyes fixed on me like she was watching a play unfold. She didn't move, didn't ask if I was okay. No one did. After what felt like an hour, but couldn't have been more than 30 seconds, Gareth descended the stairs slowly. "You tripped," he said, kneeling beside me. His tone had changed, suddenly concerned, like a mask sliding back into place. I didn't answer. I couldn't. He drove me to the emergency room in silence, both hands on the wheel, white again. No music, no questions. Just the steady sound of his breathing, too measured to be natural. At the hospital, fluorescent lights flickered above me as nurses moved with gentle urgency. Blood work, ultrasound, quiet whispers I couldn't interpret. Gareth sat in the corner, flipping through a magazine like we were waiting for a haircut. Eventually, a young doctor stepped in. "You were pregnant," she said softly. "But I'm afraid the pregnancy didn't survive the fall. The world didn't spin. It just stopped. No tears, no screams. Just that same stillness from a year ago, echoing louder this time." Later, alone in the recovery room, I laid there staring at the ceiling tiles. The pain medication dulled everything but the ache behind my ribs. A nurse came in to check my vitals. She was older, kind eyes. As she adjusted my IV, she hesitated. "Can I ask something?" I turned my head. She lowered her voice. "You didn't just fall, did you?" I stared at her. My mouth opened, then closed. She nodded as if I'd answered. I couldn't say the words, not yet. Back in the silence, I placed a hand over my stomach. The goodbye wasn't new, but the cause was? This time, it wasn't my body that failed. It wasn't chance. It wasn't bad luck. This time, it was him and her. I stared at the wall clock for a while before turning to my phone. A new message lit up the screen. From Maylise. Just a single emoji, a smiling face. Link to next chapter. Her phone buzzes on the side table. It's Maylise, texting a smiley face. Morning came slow and silent, like the hospital didn't know what had happened. I woke with a dull ache in my hips and an IV drip ticking beside me. My body felt hollow, but not numb. I didn't cry. Not anymore. I'd shed enough tears for people who only saw my grief as a nuisance. Gareth sat in the corner, scrolling through his phone like he had somewhere better to be. He hadn't said much since the night before. No apologies, no questions. Just the occasional sigh, as if I was the one who'd burdened him. A nurse came in with my discharge paperwork. Her smile was soft, but her eyes scanned my face too closely. She placed my personal items beside the bed, a clear bag with my wallet, keys, and phone. As I reached for it, I noticed a small red dot blinking faintly on the screen. I'd forgotten about the voice memo app. My heart kicked once, then steadied. I tapped the file. It wasn't long, just over 2 minutes. The timestamp showed it was recorded last month, during a visit to the OB/GYN. Gareth had insisted on coming along that day, said he wanted to support me. But the recording told a different story. I just want to understand, his voice said, calm and collected. How can one really verify if a pregnancy is real? Some women exaggerate. You know, for attention, for leverage. The doctor's response was professional, distant. But Gareth's tone, that calculated detachment, it was unmistakable. He'd been preparing for this, planning it. I replayed the audio 3 times, each time letting the chill settle deeper into my chest. I slid my phone into my bag, thanked the nurse, and walked out before Gareth could offer his fake smile. He jumped up, reaching for the keys. I'll drive? No, I said, stepping back. I've called a car. He raised an eyebrow. You're serious? I didn't answer. The rideshare pulled up and I got in, never looking back. The ride home was quiet. I asked the driver to take the long route, giving me time to think. The trees blurred past the window, and my fingers curled around the phone in my lap like it was the only anchor I had. Once inside the house, I went straight to my office. The light through the blinds fell across the floor in pale stripes. I crouched beside the locked cabinet, turned the key, and pulled out an old shoebox filled with receipts, files, and notes I hadn't looked at in months. It didn't take long to find it. A small slip of paper, yellowing at the edges. Gareth's purchase from a medical novelty site. He told me once it was for a Halloween party prank. I hadn't thought twice. But now I ran the item code through the site's archive. Fake ultrasound kits. Identical to the one he joked about once, months ago, when he saw me reorganizing old scan photos. He planted the idea early, then waited for a moment to make it matter. I laid the receipt next to my phone and pulled out a legal pad. I began writing dates, when Gareth started asking pointed questions, when Maylise made innocent jokes about me being dramatic, when I noticed the shift in how the family treated me. A pattern emerged, not a sudden betrayal, a slow burn, coordinated. They wanted me to look unstable, to paint my pain as fiction, but what they hadn't counted on was what I'd kept. I took pictures of the receipt, the audio file timestamp, and a screenshot of the website showing the matching item code. I opened my cloud folder, one Gareth didn't know existed, and created a new subfolder. I titled it, In Case They Come For Me Again. Then I stared at the screen. There was a name I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Someone who once said, if you ever need help, real help, not just a vent, call me. I typed a message, fingers trembling, but steady enough to finish. I'm ready if you are. Link to next chapter. Then begins typing a new message to an unknown recipient. I'm ready if you are. I stirred honey into my tea with slow, steady circles. The sound of the spoon against porcelain was the only thing I heard. No music, no TV. just that soft clinking and the faint hum of spring wind against the windows. My laptop sat open in front of me, the cloud folder still safe, the evidence intact. Screenshots, voice memos, receipt scans. They were all there, untouched. My hands didn't shake. Not this time. My phone buzzed across the table. "Have you seen Milas's blog post?" the text read. I clicked the link, and my stomach turned before the site even loaded. The title alone made me exhale through my nose. When Family Turns Fiction, a sister's perspective on manipulation. Milas's signature style was all over it. Light, witty, filled with self-deprecating charm, masking cold cruelty. She called me emotionally fragile, said I had a history of exaggerating for sympathy, that my recent meltdown was part of a pattern. She didn't use my name, but the hints were blatant. "She's brilliant at performance," Milas wrote. "Always has been. But I just want peace. And sometimes peace means letting go of toxic people, even when they share your blood." The comments section exploded. "You're so brave. Toxic siblings are the worst. Sending love, Milas." Someone even wrote, "Sounds like your sister needs help." I stared at the screen, letting the heat crawl up my chest slowly, purposefully. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I didn't scream. I just closed the tab. Then I made a call. "Dr. Rourke?" I said when he picked up. "It's Rowena." A pause. "Rowena. Yes. I saw the news. I need something from you. A statement. Something confirming what I was actually going through." He sighed. "I want to help. You know I do. But Gareth's attorney contacted me last week. Of course they did. They reminded me of confidentiality and liability clauses. If I speak on record, they could drag me into a suit. My practice." "I understand," I said before he finished. "Thank you for taking the call." "I believe you," he added, voice soft. "But I can't put it in writing." I ended the call. Then I grabbed the folder from my cabinet, the one labeled Rowena's War in faded ink, and drove to the Women's Legal Aid Center downtown. It was a beige building with peeling paint and a rusted mailbox, but it held more truth inside than any place I'd been lately. I sat across from a volunteer named Karina. She looked younger than me, but her eyes were seasoned. "Take your time," she said, nodding toward the papers in my hands. I laid out everything. The receipt, the flash drive, the ultrasound comparison, the recording of Gareth asking how to verify a real pregnancy. When I finished, Karina asked just one thing. "Do you want to handle this quietly, or do you want to make it public?" I met her gaze. "Quiet didn't get me anywhere. I'm ready to set it on fire." By 3:17 p.m., I had written and posted an anonymous op-ed titled "Gaslit by Blood." I didn't name names, but the details were unmistakable. I included screenshots of text messages, redacted but telling, a blurred version of the receipt, Gareth's voice captured mid-sentence, asking, "Some women fake it, right?" I posted it on a private forum for women's rights advocates, where stories were shared, supported, and then sometimes went viral. By 4:45 p.m., the post had over 30,000 views. Lawyers, therapists, journalists, people I'd never met began resharing it, commenting with outrage, empathy, fury. They didn't know my name, but they knew my story. Milas, of course, remained clueless. At 6:02 p.m., she posted a sun-drenched selfie on Instagram with the caption, "Sunshine and no regrets." 10 minutes later, the comments started changing. One said, "Wait, isn't this the sister of that woman who just exposed her whole family?" Then another, "Milas, care to comment on Gaslit by Blood?" A third, "You looked a lot more confident before receipts dropped." I watched it unfold with a stillness I didn't know I was capable of. I sipped my tea. My heart didn't race. This wasn't revenge. This was the beginning of reclamation. Linked to next chapter. One says, "Wait, isn't this the sister of that woman who just exposed her whole family?" When Gareth's mother texted inviting me to a calm discussion dinner, I didn't respond right away. I just stared at the message, then reread it twice, as if the phrasing might soften with repetition. But no, it stayed the same, soft words hiding sharp edges. I knew what they were planning: a family image rescue, a room full of carefully worded excuses, probably staged on fine china. I could have ignored it, but I didn't. Instead, I took the time to charge my phone, format a spare flash drive, and slide a recorder into the inner lining of my purse. No one there would speak the truth willingly, but I was done waiting for permission to protect myself. Tuesday evening arrived with forced smiles and the faint scent of garlic butter from Gareth's mother's kitchen. The table was set for 10, but only 8 seats were filled. No surprise. Melis liked to make her entrances loud and late. Gareth greeted me at the door like we were still married, like he hadn't thrown my reality down a staircase and watched it shatter. He touched my back. I didn't flinch, but I didn't respond either. We sat. Dinner began with pleasantries. His father asked about my work, something he hadn't acknowledged in years. His mother passed the bread with a well-practiced smile, asking if I'd thought about therapy. Sometimes trauma makes us misinterpret things, she said. Melis arrived 15 minutes in, all silk and smugness, and took her seat across from me. She didn't speak, just raised her glass, as if I were the guest of honor at a roast. Then Gareth's father cleared his throat. "Rowena, we'd like to move past all this, for everyone's sake." That's when I reached into my bag and pulled out the flash drive. I didn't say a word. I just placed it on the table. "What's that?" Gareth asked, his smile brittle. I looked at him. "Proof," he blinked. "Proof of what, exactly?" I turned to his father first. An email Gareth sent his lawyer, 2 weeks before I told anyone I was pregnant, asking how to handle a divorce in the event of a faked pregnancy claim. Gareth leaned forward, voice rising. "You have no right." And attached to that email, I continued, unshaken, was an estate planning document. Line item 26 states, quote, "Should pregnancy be disproven or deemed illegitimate, financial obligation reduced to 0. The room went still. Gareth's mother set down her wine with a clink. His father looked at Gareth, jaw tightening. I wasn't done. I clicked the recorder on my phone and played the next piece. Gareth's voice, unmistakable, echoed through the dining room. "If she keeps lying, maybe a fall will make her tell the truth." Melis's fork dropped. His mother covered her mouth. Gareth paled but didn't move. The silence was thick, shame and shock hanging over the table like a storm cloud. Gareth stood. "This is ridiculous. You're twisting everything." I stood too, but my tone was calm. "I'm not here to beg. I'm not here for closure. I'm here because you don't get to rewrite my pain." I picked up my bag, left the flash drive, and walked toward the door. As I reached the hallway, voices rose behind me. Gareth's father yelling, Melis shouting over him, "I told you not to leave proof." That was the last thing I heard before the front door shut behind me. Outside, the night was warm. I slid into my car, sat for a moment in silence, and checked my phone. A new notification. My op-ed, Gaslit by Blood, had been picked up by a national women's justice platform. The top comment read, "She didn't just survive, she fought like hell." Link to next chapter. The top comment reads, "She didn't just survive, she fought like hell." The sound that woke me wasn't my alarm. It was my phone, buzzing endlessly against the nightstand. When I finally picked it up, the screen was filled with notifications, mentions, messages. A dozen group chats lit up with unread messages. I hadn't even opened my eyes fully before I knew what happened. I sat at the kitchen table in my robe, holding a mug I'd forgotten to fill, scrolling through the aftermath. My post, the anonymous exposé, had been picked up by a national women's justice forum. The headline beneath the reshared story read, "She didn't just survive, she fought like hell." Every comment was electric. "She's braver than I could ever be." "I see my sister's story in this." Finally, someone said it. And then there were the sleuths. They had started connecting dots I hadn't even considered. People digging through public records, matching statements. A few even DM'd me with screenshots of Gareth's financial disputes and complaints from former clients. I wasn't the first woman he'd tried to discredit, just the one who didn't stay quiet. Then came Melis's rebuttal, a shaky, overly lit video she posted to her social media with tear-streaked cheeks and a gentle violin track in the background. She talked about family being messy, about forgiving those who twist pain into performance. It backfired instantly. Comments poured in, calling out the performance, questioning the timing, tearing apart her tone. One person wrote, "If this is acting, she deserves an award for worst supporting sister." Another said, "Girl, we watched you drop the knife and try to pick up a mirror." I closed the app. That was enough internet for now. Later that morning, I received an anonymous email. No subject. The sender used a name I hadn't seen in years. Jasper. Jasper had been Melis's boyfriend for nearly 2 years. Back when I thought she might actually settle into something real. He disappeared after a nasty breakup we were never told much about. His message was short. Rowena. I know what happened that night. I know why she laughed. It's time someone told you what they tried to erase. If you're ready, I'll talk. I stared at the screen. Before I could reply, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw Ivy, my neighbor across the street. Always polite, always quiet. I opened the door slowly. She stood there gripping her purse like it was armor. "Hi," she said, voice small. "Can I talk to you for a second?" I nodded and stepped aside. She didn't sit. She just stood in the middle of my living room like she'd landed on the wrong planet. I was at the party," she began. "You probably didn't notice. I left early, but I saw." "Saw what?" She swallowed. "I saw Gareth push you at the top of the stairs. He waited for you to turn your back, and he didn't slip. He meant to do it." The words didn't hit all at once. They rolled through me slowly, thick as syrup. She kept going. "I didn't come forward because, well, everyone in this town knows his family. And your sister, she's very convincing." Ivy looked down. "But I've been seeing what you posted. I saw the news. I couldn't sleep last night." I reached out and touched her arm. "Thank you for telling me." She left quickly, clearly shaken. But that was all I needed. By noon, I was back in my office with my lawyer on speakerphone, spreading out documents and scribbling a timeline on my whiteboard. "Now we have motive," I said. "We have a witness. And I have the receipts. Literally." He paused. "You want to formalize this?" "Yes. This isn't just about Gareth anymore. It's your sister, too." I stopped writing. "He didn't just hurt me. They planned it together." I hadn't said it out loud before, but now that I had, it settled over the room like truth always does. Quiet, undeniable, final. At the courthouse filing office, I slid the folder across the desk with every document they'd tried to bury. The emails, the recordings, Ivy's signed statement, the copy of the receipt. My lawyer scanned the paperwork one last time. "You're sure?" he asked. "Once we file this, it'll be public record. Gareth's reputation, Melis's career, it'll all come crashing down." I looked him in the eye without hesitation. "They didn't think twice about mine." Link to next chapter. Rowena looks him dead in the eye. "They didn't think twice about mine." By Thursday morning, the noise outside was deafening. And yet, both Gareth and Melis had gone silent. Their social media pages, once filled with perfectly filtered smiles and curated quotes about family and forgiveness, were suddenly empty. No posts, no comments, just digital dust where their voices had once echoed daily. But mine? Mine was being echoed everywhere. Media outlets were now spinning the story in every direction. Local woman challenges, domestic gaslighting, and wins the internet. Family trauma goes viral. What happens when the victim keeps receipts? I sat at my dining table again, same place I had read Melis's smug post days earlier. My inbox flooded with messages, some from reporters, others from women I'd never met. Some wrote in pain, some in fury, all of them with versions of the same story. Thank you for speaking when I couldn't. It was heavier than I expected. Later that day, I walked into my attorney's office with a folder of documents and one very specific file. An audio recording from a marriage counseling session Gareth and I had attended 6 months ago. Back then, I'd turned on the recorder because I didn't trust myself to remember how things had really unfolded. Today, I turned it over because the world needed to hear the truth. We sat in his office, papers spread between us. I hit play. On the recording, Gareth's voice was smooth, measured, familiar in all the worst ways. I just think Rowena sometimes embellishes. It's not malicious, but she tends to make things bigger than they are. The counselor's voice was polite, mine, barely audible. I had defended myself quietly, nervously. Back then, I still wanted him to like me. Still believed he might change. My lawyer paused the file. "This audio changes everything," he said, tapping a finger on the table. "This shows pattern, intent." He wasn't confused. He was crafting a narrative. I nodded, not out of pride, but clarity. That night, long after the emails stopped and the house had gone still, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. A single emoji popped onto my screen. A laughing face. Followed by one line. "You really think they'll believe you now?" I stared at it for a second before taking a screenshot. Then I forwarded it directly to my lawyer. Miles was still playing the game, but I had rewritten the rules. The next morning, we sat in a quiet conference room at the hospital. Legal counsel, risk management, compliance officers. My attorney and I handed over the folder with everything. Timestamps, the doctor's visit audio, the anonymous screenshot, and Gareth's written statement to hospital administration claiming I had overreacted after stumbling on the stairs. The head of compliance looked at me over her glasses. "You understand, if we move forward with this, we're obligated to investigate every party involved." "I understand," I said. "And you should." Later that day, as I walked back into my home, I felt something shift. Not peace, but power. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. Back at my desk, I opened a blank document. The header was already typed. Statement for press distribution. I didn't need it to go viral. I just needed it to be true. I wrote until the sun dipped behind the trees outside. Every word deliberate. Every sentence a thread pulled tight. I ended with, "Silence doesn't mean surrender. It means I was listening while they buried themselves." I hovered over the publish button. My finger rested there for a full minute. Then I clicked save. Not yet. Link to next chapter. She saves the draft, but doesn't hit publish. Not yet. I arrived at the courthouse 15 minutes early. Not because I was eager, because I needed to sit with the silence before the final formality began. The hallway was cold, echoing with footsteps that didn't belong to me. The envelope in my hand felt heavier than it should have. The finalized divorce agreement, neatly folded, legally binding. Gareth showed up 2 minutes before the hearing. He didn't look at me. His lawyer nodded stiffly at mine. Gareth wore the same blazer he used to reserve for charity galas, probably thinking appearances still mattered. But this wasn't a room where smiles meant anything. We were called in. I took the pen from the clerk before she finished her sentence and signed where I needed to. My name, followed by a period. Not a flourish. Not a hesitation. Just final. The judge asked if we'd like to make statements. I shook my head. Gareth mumbled, "No, Your Honor." Miles didn't show. Not that I expected her to. The only time she appeared lately was when it served her narrative. Outside the courtroom, my lawyer placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. "You should know, this was rare. The court didn't hesitate. They believed everything you brought in." I gave him a small nod. Because I wasn't bluffing. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel anything yet. Just an unfamiliar lightness in my chest, like breathing through a cracked window after years of stale air. That night, back home, I found myself scrolling through an old folder on my laptop, one labeled Letters Never Sent. There it was, sitting untouched since last fall. To Melis.das. I clicked it open. It was long, too long. Paragraphs detailing how much I missed her, how confused I felt, how I wanted to understand what had changed between us. I had poured words into it when I still believed she was capable of remorse, when I thought there was still a version of her that missed me too. I read every line quietly. No tears, no pity. Just the strange detachment that comes when you read a story you once starred in, but now no longer recognize. I hovered over the file for a moment, then deleted it. No hesitation. Next, I opened my photos. Scrolled until I found the last picture of Gareth and me, taken 2 weeks before everything began to fall apart. We were at a fundraiser. I had my hand on his chest, and he was smiling. So was I. But I remembered that night. I remembered the way he hissed at me in the car because I forgot to thank a donor. I remembered how I cried in the bathroom and reapplied mascara before the auction. I deleted that picture too, and I kept going. Image after image, memory after memory, wiped clean. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I was done honoring the parts of my life they never earned. By the time I finished, my phone was down to 8% battery, and the room was dark around me. I lay on the couch, a blanket over my legs, the windows open just enough to let in the night air. I didn't need justice to feel free, I whispered into the quiet. I just needed it to close the door. Then, as if summoned by the words, the doorbell rang. I sat up slowly, heart steady, not startled, just alert. At the door, no one stood waiting, but on the mat, a single envelope. No name, no return address, just silence. Link to next chapter. The doorbell rings. An envelope is left on her doormat, with no name. The envelope on the mat wasn't thick. No stamp, no handwriting. Just my name printed in soft gray type, centered like it had always belonged there. I took it inside, set it on the table, and opened it with the corner of my fingernail. Inside was a single sheet of letterhead from the North Carolina Women's Advocacy Collective. A real organization, not just an online community. The note was brief. They'd followed my story, anonymous though it began, and wanted to invite me to speak at a closed retreat for survivors of domestic psychological abuse. I sat with the letter for a long time. Let it rest on my lap while I stared out the window. It wasn't an invitation to relive anything. It was a request to speak as someone who lived through it. The house felt different now. Not emptier, not lonelier, just still. Each room no longer echoed what happened inside it. It simply existed. I walked from kitchen to living room to bedroom with a sense of grounding I hadn't felt in years. The pictures were gone. The carefully placed decor Maelis once helped arrange had been boxed up and donated. What was left were things that served me. Books, warm throws, light. I sat at my desk for the first time in weeks and opened a blank page in my journal. Not Gareth, not Maelis, not the fall, just me. I wrote about the lake, so the next morning, I went. It was a small spot just outside Chapel Hill, where Gareth and I once stood imagining picnics and toddler shoes and swimming lessons. I hadn't been back since, but I brought something with me. A stone the size of my palm, engraved with one word, still. I didn't say a prayer or release a balloon. I didn't cry. I just walked to the edge of the water, knelt, and placed the stone down where the grass met the dirt. It wasn't a funeral, it was a goodbye. That afternoon, I met with the director of the collective. Her name was Margaret, a woman in her 60s with salt gray curls and a voice that cut through air like kindness disguised as iron. She didn't ask me to relive every detail. She just said, "We think your voice could help women find theirs." I told her the truth. "I'm not sure I'm ready." She smiled. "That's okay. We're not asking for readiness, just honesty." I nodded. Sometimes surviving meant speaking while still shaking. The panel was held 3 days later at a retreat center tucked in pine trees. Quiet, tucked away. The other speakers were women of all kinds, young and old, some loud, some who barely spoke above a whisper. I sat in the front row until they called my name. I walked slowly to the microphone. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. But my voice, it caught a little on the first word. "I'm not here to tell you how to heal," I began. "I'm here to tell you you're not crazy." Heads nodded. Some wiped their eyes. One woman across the room mouthed, "Thank you." And that was enough. Later that night, back home, I sat on the same couch where I once lay hollowed out. I opened my blog, not the anonymous version I had used to survive, but the one under my name, my face, my story. I wrote the truth with full breath and no trembling. They called it a fall. I called it a beginning. And then I hit publish. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that silence is not the absence of truth. Sometimes it's the space where truth gathers strength. To anyone watching who has ever been made to doubt their reality, to second-guess their own pain, you are not alone. What they call dramatic, you know as survival. What they dismiss as overreaction, you feel deep in your bones as a warning. Trust that. I didn't share my story for revenge. I shared it because healing doesn't happen in hiding. It happens when one voice says, "Me too," and another replies, "I believe you." I used to think strength meant staying quiet. Now I know. It means knowing when to speak. What would you have done in my shoes? Have you ever stayed silent just to keep the peace, only to lose yourself in the process? I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from? What part of this story hit home for you? Or even, what didn't? And if this story touched your heart, or even made you pause to think, type 1 in the comments so I know you're out there. If you didn't connect with this video, tell me why. I'm listening. Let me know where you watched this from, what you felt, or what you would have done differently. Your voice matters. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more real stories. Stories that hurt, that heal, and that remind us we're all just trying to find our way through the quiet. See you in the next one.